You know, I got to be honest, I don't know. But I do know that the Russians are upgrading their missiles, about 80% of them. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. And I hope they do it. It's going to take them about 12 years to do it, but they need protection just like everybody else does. You know, the United States goes off starting wars here, there, and everywhere, and you don't know who's going to be next.
This retired Marine in Russia advises that he sees no different living in Russia than living in the United States. And the Russian people do not fear America; they fear the Chinese. They fear the government of the United States starting a war, utilizing one of the smaller countries against Russia, but they don't fear the American people whatsoever. I have one here from a question that just popped up coming in from Costa Rica. Mr. Chapman, aircraft sales of Russian planes are being surmounted here in this part of the world, and is bringing a real concern. Or should we have a real concern to worry about, or this is just the cost and demand over the higher cost of the U.S. Aircraft?
Well, I first of all, I don't think San Jose is buying any fighter planes. I think perhaps they are referring to Venezuela, and Venezuela has a man who is tantamount to being a dictator, even though he was elected by the people. And I will say that his popularity is fading, and people like him. He was a military person prior to being president, so people like him would tend to want to have a strong military. He doesn't like the United States, but with good reason. And he saw what has happened in Latin America over the centuries, and he saw what happened in Cuba. And I mean, this Cuban thing should have never gone this long. I mean, these people in Cuba should have never been subjected to what they have been, whether they're communists or not. It's irrelevant. I mean, we do all kinds of business with communist China. I mean, why can't we do business with Cuba? I mean, it's just silly. I mean, you know, how many people live on the island? I mean, I don't know, 2 or 3 million. I don't think there's a lot of people.
How dangerous could they possibly be?
Yeah, and they could be, but you know, and they could cause damage. But and Russia has moved back in there as a more active ally, we'll say. And I think it's in the best interest of the United States to have a friendly relationship with everybody in Latin America. And but you're going to see the same kind of foreign policy from Mr. Obama as you did it from his predecessor. And they don't have anything to say about anything. They just do what they're told. And I'm seeing a dichotomy of action within the ranks of the Illuminati, and Brzezinski wants to expand a permanent U.S. presence in the Middle East as well as West Asia, we'll call it, and he's not getting a big argument with that. But the big argument is between him and Summers, which is an advisor to the president. And Summers says we should approach this from a G8 or a G20 direction, because Brzezinski wanted the G2, which was China and the United States only. And that was because of his desires and his plans in the Middle East and in Asia, because he's the one who wrote them all up. I mean, I knew they were going to invade Iraq, and I knew they were after Iran because he wrote about it in 1980. All you had to do was read Foreign Affairs, which is the house organ of the Council on Foreign Relations. And so we're seeing an argument among the people at the top as to how they should go about doing things. And so all is not peaceful among the elitists.
Your favorite girlfriend there in Southern California, this is Betty. She sends an IM. She says, Mr. Chapman, as you reported more and more in the past weeks that more and more people here in the States would be paying less or having problems with credit cards and mortgages, why isn't this stimulus package propounded on by Bush, now Obama, but heavily pushed by Feinstein and Pelosi, why is it not working?
Well, you got to be fair. It hasn't really even started as yet. I got a letter the other day telling me that next month the government's going to give me $250 because I'm an old person. My wife had the same letter. So we're going to get $500 for stimuli, and so it hasn't begun yet. But most of the stimulus is next year and the 2 following years. So there will be some stimulus this year. It'll slow down the descent of the economic debacle. In other words, we're looking at a minus 6.3% in the fourth quarter of last year, drop in GDP. First quarter should be about the same, maybe a little better. And then as we go on through the year, it might get down to a minus 4%. Next year, a lot of stuff is coming. And it probably get down to even, so that the GDP doesn't gain anything or lose anything. They might get lucky. It might go to a +1. And after that, the bottom's going to fall out again, which means they'll have to go out and spend another $12.8 trillion. And so they're not treating the cause of the disease. They're only treating the result of the disease, and that is a financial thing. They have to go to the very roots of the problem. And it's just like a car that the paint's peeling off and it's getting rusty. You strip it down. In economies, you purge them. Very painful, but it's got to be done. And then you get rid of the depression real quick. 2, 3, 4 years. The way they're doing it could last 20 years, the idiots. But that's why they want it that way, because they did this deliberately, and they wanted to bring the world to their knees economically and financially so that they would be forced to accept world government. And that's what all these military actions are about, to get people's attention off of domestic problems, and their attention might be in Afghanistan, Pakistan, maybe Iran, maybe India. I mean, who knows what these guys are going to do?
What's your personal or professional opinion concerning the latest release of data from Harvard professor citing that inflation is the answer, or do you have any observation there?
Well, I'll tell you, inflation is not the answer. Purging the system on a classical economic basis is, and they ain't going to do that. So in order to extend the problem until they think they can either deal with it or pull the plug at the time they want to and let us go into deflation, they're going to continue to inflate. When you increase money and credit in the money available fiscally to $12.8 trillion, I mean, that's monumental. And it's not going to work. And that's going to cause inflation, particularly the monetization of debt. Now, what is that? It's when the Treasury tells the Fed, gosh, we can't borrow enough money. There's not enough people out there with money to buy our bonds. Will you do that for us? And the Fed says, of course. Us big, strong, privately owned Fed, we'll go and do that for you. So they just told them at the Treasury that we're going to allow you to sell us about $1 trillion worth of bonds for various reasons. But the Federal Reserve doesn't have any money. So they create it out of thin air. And they credit the books of the U.S. government at the Treasury, and they debit their own book. And then they get these bonds. And the bonds, they either sell them slowly into the market to control the market, or some of them, they might lend them out. That is what monetization is. And when it happens, it is immediately very inflationary. And so we are going to get inflation. It's already cooked into the cake, so to speak. And it's going to be there. And it'll start showing up next month. And then as time goes on, it'll get worse.